Level C1, Lesson 3, Multimedia. Peter Schweizer, the Wonk. Listening, Part 2. When Schweizer began his project, he consulted a former securities regulator who happened to have an office down the hall from his in Florida. The advisor told him that investigators always look for two things in insider trading cases: whether individuals had access to material information, and whether they engaged in unusual trading. There is probably no group of people on Earth with greater access to inside information than members of Congress. K Street lobbying firms get rich fees from hedge funds for ferreting out intelligence, such as whether some pending legislation has votes to pass, that any member of the Senate or House routinely obtains in the cloakroom. But there have been no insider trading cases brought against members of Congress, nor will there likely be. This is partly because, though insider trading law is not settled, case law usually requires that an offending insider bear fiduciary responsibility at the company involved. But Congress's relative immunity also owes to the fact that in this regard, as many others, Congress lives by its own rules. Schweizer notes that the Senate's Ethics Manual devotes an entire chapter to the proper use of the mail and of Senate stationery, but is silent on the subject of insider trading. Ditto the rules of the House, which state that a member's recusal from a vote affecting his or her stock portfolio might be denying a voice in the process. Neither the executive nor judicial branches allow such laxity. While congressional stock trading is condoned, some of the activity risks at the very least the appearance of impropriety. Nancy Pelosi, for one, will likely be answering questions about possible conflict of interest issues raised on Schweizer's study. Pelosi and her husband Paul are reportedly worth $40 million with a significant stock portfolio. In the spring of 2008, when Pelosi was Speaker of the House, Paul made a big play between $1 million and $5 million on Visa, the credit card company. What was striking about the investment, apart from its size, was the price the Pelosi's paid for it. The Visa initial public stock offering was one of the hottest of the decade, its price per share jumping from $44 to $65 just 48 hours after public trading began. But the initial public offering at the $44 price was reserved for institutional investors and mutual funds, plus a select group of individual investors. The Pelosi bought their Visa shares in 3 transactions, the first of which, 5,000 shares, came at the lower IPO price. This may have been just a piece of investment luck, or an instance of Visa extending a friendly gesture to an important political figure. Schweizer is happy to posit another possibility. The Pelosi's acquired the IPO shares shortly after the introduction into the House of legislation that, if passed, would adversely affect Visa's business. Visa makes money by licensing its name to banks, which in turn issue the cards and charge customers interest, and by charging swipe fees to merchants who accept the cards as payment. These fees, paid by retailers, range from 1% to 3% of the purchase amount every time a Visa card is used. The proposed 2008 law would have allowed retailers to negotiate lower fees with the major credit card companies, who, gaining billions from these fees, predictably opposed the measure. The bill passed through committee, but never made it to the floor of the House. It eventually died, and 2 similar efforts also failed to reach the House floor. Congress did finally act on the issue 2 years later as part of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. By that time, the value of Pelosi's IPO shares had more than doubled, while the market as a whole had shown a double-digit decline. Pelosi bridles at any suggestion that her financial holdings and her official duties were linked. Pelosi spokesman Drew Hamill notes that several other members of Congress also took advantage of the Visa IPO. The controversy, he insists, is a preposterous idea cooked up by a right-wing hack. Pelosi's office might have added that there was nothing illegal in the visa trades, nor even a violation of the House rules. But that is the point of Schweizer's book. Indeed, none of the special dealing in his study is technically illegal. They have legislated themselves as untouchable as a political class, he writes.